We are Troika. This is Eva, I'm Connie, and this is Sebastian. Our backgrounds are in engineering, in graphic design and product design, and this skill set enables us to work across a broad range of media. So you can see we work in graphics, we make products and installations. We create artifacts that are never purely functional nor pure art, but that ask questions, that trigger curiosity, and that are playful. We make books, we write books, we create graphic identities, typographic installations. And we make sculptures that are sometimes called displays, sculptures, or large-scale installations. But we like them to be meaningful, and we like them to be a genuine mix between a forward-thinking approach to technology and a social or critical comment.
We're very interested with a lot of different things, but I think that's one like recently we found. It's like somebody, a scientist, that has tried to find like new projection for the world, and we absolutely love maps in the sense that even though we are at a time where the world converges and everything collapses together, we see in the map like an inherent lack of understanding. There's an incompleteness in the maps, the impossibility of like rendering like the world as it is that we find beautiful. At one point, we got approached by British Airways. And they were building like Terminal 5 in London, which is like an airport terminal. And they wanted a large world clock. And we jumped on the project because we absolutely love world clock. What I love about it is like the reduction that the world can be: Paris, London, New York, Tokyo, and that's it. So we thought, what happened with time and the world map and the longitude? And we thought at one point there is something that is fabulous, which is, imagine what time it is in the North Pole. Well, it's all the time in the world. And this is the title of the installation. So what we did is like very playfully started to display, like places of natural wonder and telling the people that catch a glimpse of that installation, it's 6:30 in the Great Barrier Reef. We have like a lot of different series about that. Of course, we have like Lost Cities, we have Abu Simbel, Tenochtitlan. We have like the greatest museum in the world, and I guess you've all understood like the concept was like to try to expand a little bit the notion of a world clock and give like a glimpse of an expanded worldview for the people who travel there.
Yeah, not only did we develop the concept of this sort of unconventional world clock, but we also developed the technology behind it. We are really interested in technology as a cultural artifact, as a sort of gateway to thinking of different people, especially interested of so-called outdated technology and display technology. So we were very interested to build our own display for this installation. Now, if it comes to display, you probably know there are sort of two ends of the scale. One is very low resolution display, which is very efficient because it needs very little control, and then your sort of vector display, which is really refined. Now, what's a shame with a low resolution display is that you can't really blow it up because always remains are blocks, as you see over there. So what we designed is a display system which is sort of right in the middle between the two. We figured that we could develop like a segmented display which uses curves instead of only ever the same module, which are pixels in the former displays. The technology we used for it and where the whole thing started is called electroluminescent ink. And that's basically an ink which you can print in a silkscreen process onto an acetate. And if you subject it to an electric current, it lights up. So we figured if you can light up one area, then you can light up plenty, and you can also create a display system which works that way.
What we really love are things that are tangible, and essentially what really brought us to this whole project, besides the idea of creating a world clock, was the fact that we were wondering why is it that there's so many hundreds of LCD screens that are potentially able to display full-color information, but all they do is really display times two-color information. So you say, what a waste. Wouldn't it be amazing to push that idea and find something that is more suitable for this type of display? And luckily enough, we came across this technology, which at the first, or when we encountered it, was basically just used for large printing of large areas, for big posters that would switch on and off, which we found rather boring, and thought, okay, here we go. We've got our idea for the display. We have this amazing technology that hasn't been pushed. Let's see what we can do with it. So one of the first steps was actually trying to find someone or a screen printer who would actually be willing to take on the challenge and create the 62 letter display.
It's basically a modular typeface, so the way it works is you recreate the same cell, and by lining them up one after another, you have an updatable display system. What you see here is actually the ink printed onto the acetate. As you see, it's really sort of thin and transparent. It's extremely energy efficient. One cell looks like that if all the segments are switched on. And, well, if you double it up, then you can create a row of letters. If you switch on certain combinations, you can create all the letters you want. And what we found from a typographic point of view, an interesting challenge is to expand it from only capitals to also include small caps, common letters, and a sans serif. And script, which we found particularly interesting for, well, to use in combination with the electroluminescent technology, as it has a very sort of human feel to it. So some close-ups from the installation where you can see the different segments, which are switched on. It's basically a big screen printing process, and that was, well, it was really nice to go down to the factory and work out with the manufacturer how far we can push it, how low can we go, all that kind of.
And it's really how we work. I mean, we're 3 people. We do have a few other people working with us in the studio, but what we really love doing, and becomes apparent in all of our projects, is that we love working with people. And this can be a screen printer, that can be a biologist, that can be a scientist, and that's really, really amazing that we get the opportunity to enter fields that we are unfamiliar with, and then collaborate with those people, and yeah, come up with things like that.
And there's a parallel I would like to make as well. Like the previous speaker mentioned that art should not be design, or design should be art, or I don't remember exactly. We are very muddled up with that. We think like much more like in the terms of the Bauhaus. You know, like the distinction between art and design is like less than 100 years ago. Before was very muddled up. I don't think it's prehistorical to look at that. And our approach, as you can see, mixes a lot of art practice or art thinking. But if you take the example of that display, for example, like Connie mentioned that we developed it essentially as a reaction to full color and full resolution display. If you look at digital convergence, I find it quite interesting to be able to see problems of like display technology on a completely different angle and realize where you're getting at. And I love that technology because it's really hands-on. You can really go and print it, as opposed to invested $100 million into a TFT LCD screen manufacturing plant. Last thing, this thing consumes about 700 watt for 25 meter of screen. So it's very economy efficient. Yeah. There you go.
So how do I make the jump to this? Interesting. Well, basically, that is our coffee machine. And a journalist came to our studio a while back, and when we saw the article printed in the magazine, that was the first image that jumped up and puzzled us at first, but then really, yeah, we really liked it because it sums up what we love and what we're about. First of all, when the handle came off the coffee holder, we didn't go buy a new coffee machine. We, for us, went the most immediate way and path and just got a clamp. And it's working perfectly still. But we also love, we just love the quirkiness and the rawness behind it. And we love, it's surprising. It's a mix. It's a remixing, a hacking of different things, existing materials, existing elements. And you can find that in many of our projects.
Yeah, part of the fun is really to imagine new functionalities for old objects. So really to look at an object and almost try to forget everything you know about it. It's quite apparent in some of our earlier works. It's SMS Korea projector, and it's basically a recombination of camera objective, and there is a mobile phone in the handle of the projector. It's completely mobile. As you see, there's a little lead which goes into the jacket. At the end of that lead is a really heavy lead battery. So that basically enables you to project texts around the cities. Some which you write yourself, others are maybe texted to you by your friends.
This was great. We went to the fairground, and you can't see it, but he's standing there with his teddy bear, this grown-up man, and we just had to write that on his back.
What I say,
What's especially interesting is sort of to go around the city and sort of adapt it to your own means. So what works really well is the sort of street signs, because there's a reflective diamond screen on them. So when you project onto them, it lights up really brightly. So this is sort of our everyday poetry machine. So go around the city and sort of project our thoughts and comments.
And I guess it's a very interesting, I mean, this project, we started with that project, yes, about 10 years ago now. At that stage, there was no a mention of micro projector or things that could be adapted to mobile, yet everybody could sense the feeling that it was in the air and it would happen at one point. What is interesting to us as well is what content do you put on display? Like people at the moment, especially, they're very, very good at creating giant display, and the content is missing. So it's quite interesting to see what use it could have. And we work a lot like that. We're making often very small prototype of thing that we can go and test and see the reaction and develop further from that.
Yeah, there was the project was quite widely featured in the Blogs Fair, and at a certain point there was a lot of requests, so we just had at a certain point to make the decision: are we going to become a product company and only going to develop the SMS projector?
After phone calls from Kuwait, whether they can put it in mass production.
Yeah, but we decided that that's not what we wanted to do, and we just wanted to stay like who we were and develop our concepts further and put out prototypes.
Instead, mass producing that, we did that, which is our tool for armchair activists. It's sort of a follow-up device for the SMS projector, similarly raw, and it's a device that you can strap to any lamppost, and you can text a message to it, and it's going to speak it out aloud. It originally was a reaction to a ban in front of the Houses of Parliament that banned all the protesters that would go there and protest Iran. So we said, okay, why don't you do it from the comfort of your own living room? You strap this thing on the lamppost and you test your answer in protests.
Hello everybody. I am the tool
Talks in
for
many
the
languages and
armchair
dialects.
activists.
So now, the interesting bit with this was that it was a self-initiated project, but we were approached by MTV, who loved it, and asked us to stage an anti-campaign for the music European, there I got yeah, the European Music Awards. Now, what happened, we went to the Rathausplatsen in Copenhagen. We strapped our device onto the lamppost and staged a whole campaign around it, asking people to get their voice heard. So everyone could text their answers and messages to the machine, which was the initial setup with no censorship or anything. But the most amazing thing was how people actually then utilized the thing and made it their own, where you had, for instance, a sausage stand next to the machine, and the old guy started advertising his sausage after some other person had placed the text that the sausages are bad, and people started communicating. Or they would wake up in the morning and one person was writing this continuous story about this little girl sitting in the box and would come back every day and continue the story. And that was really the good part, or the great part, how people actually started making it their own.
This is like a sculpture we made also for Terminal 5, for British Airways again. And it's a 5 meter by 2 meter by 1 meter sculpture that looked like a disco ball or a space bean. Or he has had like many different like names over the different stage he had, but essentially it's covered with like a very old flip-dot display element. So like a little mirror that can literally flip from one side to the other, exactly like the same thing that you had in train station, and they were going and making all the display. Why we love it is because it's for many reasons. There is like a physicality to it because they flip. But maybe I better show you something and leave you and show you.
So we had this idea about the sound. We did remember what it would sound like as kids and how it reminds you of travel. But I think I can speak for the three of us, only when we really saw it up there after the installation. The sound was just amazing, and the thoughts it triggers. And what was quite funny was when we put it up, we obviously had the help of a lot of people, 40 workers, I think. And while putting it up, they were obviously skeptical what their tax money is being wasted on. And once this thing was up and switched on, they started taking pictures and for their wives, and it was great to see. And I think that's what Seb was hinting on before, that those things work on many different levels. It has quite an easy entry point, which works more on an emotional level, but then you can ask questions, you can go deeper, you can ask questions about technology, you can ask questions about reusing, reinventing, and yeah, that's really what we love and what we're about.
And I think it started like when British Airways came to us, we were incredibly lucky in the sense that we have very often and most of the time clients that came and give us like a carte blanche, what you call in French. They come without any very particular brief, and they leave us like they work like in a very like an art commission basically. So there they wanted something. The only thing parameters they gave us is like make something for the atrium. So we had the space as a context, and it was up to us. And there was, I guess, like as a starting point, if you want to show you a little bit how we're working, we have the memory of that amazing moment where you cross with a plane, where you cross the clouds, and suddenly you leave behind all the agitation of the airport, of the departure, of things like that, and you enter this kind of very ethereal and very universal kind of place, I guess. And at the same time, we also love those little things that I was mentioning to you about, which are like a very quirky display that make a lot of noise. To show you a bit, like this was like the first kind of concept we presented, and this is basically the cloud in its first iteration. So the animation are very raw.
From the very beginning, we knew what we wanted to see up there. The concept was pretty clear, but the path there was 8 months of sweat and thinking how we're actually going to make it. So we want to tell you a little bit about how we went about making it and the challenges that came with it.
So the first tricky bit is like, if you look at a shape like that, and you want to tile it with regular element, because they are like little dots, they have a fixed size, and you're trying to tile a kind of very complex shape, three-dimensional. That's very difficult. So we look at nature, and nature does it very well, but nature is cheating. Because they have different elements, different sizes. So pineapple was a very great influence for us, because there is like a double spiral on there. So we look at that, and then we wrote a computer program that would do spiral on any object, Problem is that I could only program something that would do that on a kind of a cucumber. It's not really a cloud. So we were not very happy. But then we managed to make a pill. You can see there is a spiral. So the pill was not like, so it was still very far from it. So we stretched the pill, and we were really happy. So, this is a cloud.
Well, it was really about finding a trade-off and not having a too busy shape, because it would be animated all over. So we also wanted people to be able to actually look at the animation and not to get distracted by the shape at the same time.
But look at the tiling, immaculate, amazing. So we came back to British Airways and say, hey, do you want that one? And they were like, wow, this is very well tiled. So they gave us the cash. They gave us the cash.
I'm sure you will know how much clients tend to notice details. You have worked on nights and nights and
Absolutely.
nights.
So we went and we said, like, this is the 21st century, so we're going to CNC machine everything. That was a good idea, except that the budget was far, far too little for CNCing something that is 5 meters long. So we had to go back to the basics and look at basically airplane, boat hull, and stuff like that are basically made flat by deforming flat strips, essentially. So that's how it's made. You can see they're all flat strips. And basically there's like an armature, kind of skeleton, with like all laser cut flat strip that are, bent back and applied to it and welded back to it.
Like a boat, really.
Like a boat. The thing is that it's very complex. So there's like, they're all numbered. There's like 300 set of different pieces. It's all unique. It's all like distributed because the distribution is very, very strange. There is no grid. There is no parallel. But it's well tiled. So we're working, most of the time we're working with, for those, larger scale project, we're working with a company called Mike Smith Studio, among others. But Mike is very good at making things, but he didn't want to make that because he said it would never work. So we had to make a prototype. Yeah, that's the first prototype. And I think you can hear like our curator getting crazy behind.
The size of that is just yeah.
Well, what was really challenging was that we also had to prove that how the animation, the impact the animation would have on this like 5 meter long sculpture. And it was actually a real challenge to do that on an object which was only 1.5 meters wide. So this is a 1:1 scale prototype, and it's roughly like 1/10 of the overall sculpture. But it really helped us to imagine, and also helped the client to imagine the impact of the final piece.
Of course, we had to rewrite. We're using like something that's from the 70s, flip-dot display. That's HP patent from back then. The control was very, very slow. It was made to display like typefaces. So it would go clack, 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 clack. So if you want to make like animation, you have basically to do everything again. So we have like a big like 2008 implant on the whole system. That's it being like starting to be manufactured. It's manufactured in 2 halves. The first half is sprayed black, while the other half is done. And this is like close up, so you can see that I wasn't joking. Everything is numbered. And not only everything is numbered, but after like the computer, like it needs to know which dot is where, so he's able to control them. So every dot is numbered as well. So there's 4,638 dots that are grouped and individually numbered. And we have like 300 pages of things like that, and people could go completely mad making it.
What you see here is basically how your typical display, which is sort of 5 by 7 dot, is redistributed on the cloud. So you have sets of 35 dots each, which are obviously tiled slightly differently on this like organic shape.
And this gives you an idea of the inside. There is 15 kilometers of wire.
Hence
of course,
the Death Star.
Yeah, this was called the Death Star at this point by the people that were helping us to make it.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite easy. Like every flip dot has 3 wires, so we have this 5,000 flip dots. It's kind of a lot of wires.
So you see, like the opportunity you have in revisiting old technology. Sometimes it's good, sometimes better. And there you go. This is like half made, and after it's going to be assembled, put back into.
Yeah, obviously the whole sculpture is populated by flip dots, so we had to build a cradle because it couldn't lie on its belly either. So then we came to develop the animations, and in our very first sketch was all really easy because flip dots were sort of on a rectangular pattern. Well, once we've built the thing, it obviously wasn't anymore because you can't tile a three-dimensional organic shape with a sort of rectangular pattern. So from our very first sketches, we had to move on a little bit. The challenge was also that we had to develop the animation at the same time as the cloud was being built. So what we did was we created a simulation program in order to be able to understand how that would work.
Sorry. Yeah, you might be a really good animator, but in order to visualize what you're going to have on that three-dimensional shape in the end, we needed to create a sort of a platform, something that would enable us to visualize and also program this, but on a flat sort of surface. So we developed a program where we're folding out that surface, and that enabled us then to really see what we're actually doing.
Yeah, looks a little bit like sort of Fuller maps, the sort of maps Buckminster Fuller created when he sort of flattened out the surface of the globe. And that was a starting point to create the animation, to make sure that they are all seamless. If something is traveling along the cloud, that it is really traveling and not jumping around the across the top and coming back at the other end. Well, then we moved on to the installation, and want to show you a little film.
Very dramatic soundtrack. We did not choose that soundtrack. It was actually made by British Airways.
Okay, so you can see that we're very coherent as well, which is good.
Basically, by the time the cloud was built, all security gates were also built at the airport, which meant that we couldn't just roll it in through the entrance.
The art collection as being
but
an
we had to fly it
integral
across the
part of
terminal.
what we're doing here. The art within our lounges just adds another dimension. We want people to have something to talk about, to come and see. I'm so excited about the art installation out in the atrium, which is the floating cloud, which has been done for us by Troika. I just can't wait to see people's faces when they see it with the movement.
What we're looking at here is the lower half of the cloud. It's a welded aluminium structure that's covered in about 4,500 electronically controlled discs that just flip from silver to black.
After 9 months, we're actually going to see tonight the launching of the cloud. Now this is actually going to be flown in right across from the car park, right through over the atrium areas, up over balconies, at least 3 balconies, and going to come and land on a balcony, and then it's going to be suspended mid-air over the atrium, over the escalators.
It was a clear brief from British Airways to put something into the atrium, and they wanted something that would attract people, like
This is at 5 o'clock in the morning, right?
It was like an interesting
Now
for
it's the
us
video
to
made
work
after
on. Was,
it wasn't
when you
stored.
take off,
Now you
and
know why
you
you didn't want to
suddenly
show.
it's very grey and very busy, and it's the airport, and then suddenly you pass through the cloud. So we started to work on clouds, literally passing through the layer of the shopping center, through the escalator, and arriving into the lounges. The inspiration behind the cloud was all those very old, electromagnetic display that you get like in train station and airport in the old time that we're going like tack, 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 tack. Those old technology had like a fantastic thing, which is the noise that is associated with it, and if you hear one, suddenly you're traveling already. Yeah, so the cloud is now located like in the atrium in front of the British Airways lounge. Because it's in the atrium, everybody can come and see it.
I'm absolutely ecstatic with the results of what the
Okay.
Great, fantastic. This is like we love also like viruses. Is there?
No.
Is there like a?
No.
There's no image of public crashes of computers, but that's something we love. We love like when you go in the tube and suddenly there is loads of advertising and then there's one blank computer screen that is tilted 90 degrees and say fatal error. We love that because it's kind of reminding you that, you know, like what we entrust in the digital technology so much is actually based on very little. And it's quite unstable, and we tend to forget that. I love also Cache Machine showing, you know, like basically splash screen of Windows XP, and you're trusting your money to that. And the last one is like, I don't know, like we grew up with, like, I grew up with computers. Like I think the first computer I had was like ZX81, very old, and then Commodore 64, and that was great because you could have like Pac-Man going and eating everything. In any case, we made, I think, like a virus for, like at the beginning, like viruses were very harmless. They were like a joke. They would like perk the programmer would make. And we thought that there was this kind of little innocence that was lost. So we introduced like the Newton virus, which is the first virus which introduces gravity into your computer. So this is your absolutely beautiful Mac laptop. And when it's getting it, it does that. And it's still sensitive, of course. So
the first version of this we made now probably 4 or 5 years ago, something like that.
yeah.
First with a little box attached to the back, and then the motion sensor in the Macintosh enabled us to actually really make a better version of it.
And after we started to resell, you know, sell it on the internet, and now we are working on the upgrade because Apple has prevented us to do what we're doing properly. Even though, who was it? Not Steve Jobs. Who is the second one? The CTO of Apple bought like 3 versions. Steve Wozniak, yeah.
We're just really interested to somehow bring something from the actual world into the virtual world.
And goes on and on and on and on and on.
Just a nice little tool to tease your friend when you think they have to work too long and they need to woken up.
There you go. Well, in any case, I guess you kind of understand where we're coming from. We love doing like very experimental work as well as doing like very large thing. We have also like because like we're like if you start thinking about digital technology and like people that are you know there's like few main themes. We're trying to embody digital technology to give it a shape. We're trying to like use it as a medium for social commentary and using design as a vehicle for that. And I guess there is like a lot of it's a very novel field, like interactivity and so on, and things like that. And in physical computing, they coined it now. So we also try to make sense of if you want, the surrounding. We basically like authored this book, so which is called Digital by Design. Maybe you'll find it somewhere around. It's published on Thames and Hudson, and basically it's a compilation of a lot of things that we find very interesting, mainly in you know, like object and project that challenges the notion of what digital technology are and how you can use it both in a design and art practice. And yeah, it's a beautiful book. Have a look if you want to know more about what kind of field we like. And I guess we're quite done now. The last thing I wanted to mention is like the future, what we're working on now. We're working on the Expo Pavilion for the UK Expo Pavilion in Shanghai for the Expo 2010 with Thomas Heatherwick. There we made like the content part of the pavilion, and that was very interesting, and look forward to it because we took like an approach that is much more like installation based as opposed to strictly exhibition design. So that's one thing. And the second thing that is upcoming is like a series of 3 commissions in Toronto for the city of Toronto, where we made like a very exciting, beautiful sculpture, but it's not made yet, so we can't show it to you. That's it.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.